Ready.
สวัสดีค่ะ Good afternoon and welcome distinguished guests. Thank you for joining us at our TMA's Top Talk. Pushing the boundaries, creating a novel innovation ecosystem as AstraZeneca. My name is Nanisha Chanthautit. It's my pleasure on behalf of TMA to be the master of ceremony for today's event. Well, first of all, I would like to invite you, Ms. Piyapon Panachet, Chairwoman of TMA Corporate Performance Management Group Committee. Well, please welcome.
Sawadika. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome you to TMA Top Talk, which is the most exclusive talk by the world influencer in order to give a foresight and inspiration to time management. The event has been organized for more than 10 years. And the audience are invited to this event only. And well, the world is changing so rapidly, and the science and technology took us to the new era, while the environment is suffering and sending some impact to many lives. It is amazing how tiny little creature like COVID-19 rocked the world in a way that we could not imagine before. And we are lucky to have some white knight that has been stopping it. And one of them is AstraZeneca. Vaccine is only one of many things that Astra has been done and to improve the medical treatment and the access to Medicare. Hence, a lot of innovation are needed to get to that point. In one group of a very old and big company, Astra has been established for over 80 years, and is amazed how can innovation been creating under that kind of roof. That's why AstraZeneca has a BioVenture Hub to create a new approach to work closely between the small biotech company, an academic group, and a big pharmaceutical company like AstraZeneca, who have a lot of skills and equipment and capability to push it further. And today we are delighted to welcome Mr. Magnus Björsne, Executive Director of AstraZeneca BioVenture Hub. Mr. Magnus has joined AstraZeneca for more than 3 decades, for almost 3 decades. He involved in a series of research, starting from cardiovascular discovery research management, and then interestingly, he moved to strategic planning and business development since 2006. And also involved with some M&A and license deals. Since 2014, Mr. Magnus is leading AZ BioVenture Hub to enhance a collaboration between the small guys like biotech and academic and the big company. His experience will be very useful for not only pharmaceutical company, but also to many companies who look for transformation, for innovation. Please join me to welcome Dr. Magnus Björsne.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you for the very kind introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure being here today. So I think given the audience is beyond life science, I will start off with giving you a bit of context to what's happening in our industry. And with respect to what we have done, as Anne alluded to, this has actually also been implemented by ABB in Sweden and Switzerland in the use of their technology with respect to power supply and automation. Automotive industry and especially Volvo has also looked into this model. So it is by no means exclusive to the pharmaceutical industry. But that's what I will talk about today. But keep your eyes open because it's applicable everywhere. So our industry experiences a lot of change at the moment, and it's not very different from any other industry. We are a bit different in a sense that it takes very long time to develop new medicines. So the value chain spans basically up to 15 years for the development of one product. So you could argue that change needs to be slow, and we can't afford to be slow. So how should we work in this constantly changing environment? And the factors that impacts us, we partly have a push from technology, and that is valid in any business today. At the same time, we see a pull from the environment, both from payers. Healthcare, the way it is driven today, some people argue it's not sustainable. The costs are too high. Even though pharmaceuticals is a tiny proportion of the total cost, society needs to reduce cost of healthcare if we extrapolate with all the elderly population that is growing around the world. At the same time, we face a pull from patients. The generation that will become the future patients are very different from the people we are used to treating, and the difference is the way they are informed. So access to information makes the patient an even more powerful influencer when it comes to healthcare. So how are we dealing with this, and what more precisely are the consequences of this? So this is research made by a bunch of consultancy firms actually 5-6 years ago, and what they discussed about then was that life science and the pharma industry will develop into 4 different segments. The first one is what they call lean innovators, and these are the companies that used to be companies engaged in generic medicine. So that's medicines that go off patent. And the huge patent cliff that our industry has experienced is basically to an end. So this business model is no longer sustainable for them. So they are turning into these lean innovators, which is all about relentless cost management and excellence in execution and logistics and what have you. The second group of companies is what is called around the patient innovators. And this is where the traditional big pharma sits. And it will still be about bringing novel medicines which meet unmet medical need to the market, but it will be not enough to just deliver medicines. They need to be connected to other type of services. The third category is value innovators, and this is a quite interesting segment. These are companies that basically merge different type of technologies into new innovation. So it's combinatorial innovation in a sense. And I mean, data and pharma is one example. You can make this list quite long. The fourth category is health digitals, and these are either digital companies like Google and Apple that go into health, or it is healthcare companies that go towards digital. So what I will focus on today is around the patient innovators, big pharma. What is happening and what is AstraZeneca doing to cope with the speed that in change that we currently experience? So in essence, you could argue that our industry is going from sick care to health care. We have traditionally been engaged in diagnosis of patients and treatment of patients. Today, we address the whole patient journey, or you could call it the value chain if you so want. So it's everything from prevention to post-treatment and wellness. And this really means that we are redefining the meaning of innovation. And I think in the future, you will not die of cancer, you will die with cancer. Our strategy in diabetes today is not to lower blood glucose, it is to cure diabetes. And this has a lot of implication. It's a lot about the use of information technology and data. So AI-driven research is becoming really, really relevant. We talk about much more personalized treatment, and it's basically covering the whole scope of both wellness and sickness. So if we then look into this and ask ourselves, what does it mean to us as an organization? Well, it has actually quite a dramatic change. And the first is that in our industry, the customer, you could argue, is it the one who pays for the medicine or is it the patient? Today, I would say that our industry totally see the patient as the customer, despite the fact that it is not the patient that pays in all instances. So patient centricity is really key in everything we do. The other dimension here is the outside experts. And if we look into the future value propositions from our industry, it will be about combining medicines with ICT technology and sensor technology, and you name it. And here we talk about sector convergence. The fact that disease in the future will not be treated by medicines in isolations mean that in our industry, intellectual property is super important. But when we develop adjacent technologies, we don't necessarily need to have exclusivity on that technology. And this really opens up for new ways of partnering with other type of industry players in order to co-develop and co-innovate according to totally new business models, basically. Then when it comes to agility, I think we have never faced as many options as we do today with respect to where to spend our money. So it becomes very important to move into a minimal viable product strategy, which is not easy in a business that is so heavily regulated as the pharma industry. But we need to think down those lines. That in turn means that we need to ask ourselves whether our bandwidth is relevant with respect to the type of technology we need to explore. And it really impacts culture. And culture is something that is perceived to be very difficult to change. I think it's doable. We have seen it happen, but it takes a lot of thinking to do it in the right way. Then we have technology itself. And if we put science in biology and pharmacology and chemistry, etc., on the side, the main area that drives change is, of course, what happens in the digital space. And this puts a lot of different requirements that when it comes to our skill base. We are not an IT company, but we have an IT component in everything we do today. So access to talent becomes very, very important. And this is difficult because this is talent that is of relevance not only to the pharma industry. Today, we are competing with all other businesses when we recruit staff. That was not the case 10 years ago. So this also impacts the way we need to redeploy our own talent in order to be fit for fight going forward. And a few words about management of innovation. Scholars talk about Horizon 1, 2, and 3. And Horizon 1 type of innovation is what we do every day. It's how we exploit our existing skills and existing resources in order to generate cash flow. So this is our everyday business. But if you extrapolate what we do today, and if we continue to do the same, we will probably become obsolete in the end. So if we move to Horizon 2, this is to some extent also incremental, but it's not obvious. And I would say that the pharma industry is really good in both these two horizons. We realize that we need to explore the non-obvious. So we have good strategies in place for both Horizon 1 and Horizon 2 type of research. But if we look into Horizon 3, which is the type of innovation that is referred to as being disruptive, or my own interpretation of this is that it could also be actually disruptive and obvious, but not really wanted. So we close our eyes for what's happening. And I think Kodak is a good example. They invented the digital camera themselves, but they didn't think it should have an impact. And we all know what the consequences of those thoughts were. But to deal with Horizon 3 type of investments in a large organizations is utterly difficult because it's high risk and it is basically something that will disrupt existing power balance in the industry. And it could even be a threat to yourself. So how do you create momentum and allow yourself to work in all these three horizons at the same time? It's a big challenge. You have all seen this. This is developed in the early 60s. It's called the Morse Law. It's a way to depict this. Originally, it was used to depict the speed by which processors in computers increase their capacity. Today, it is used to describe the speed by which technology develops. And this is what we talk about when we talk about technology push. But if we, on top of this now, put a different type of graph, which is about the way we manage innovation, and if we look into what has happened there, it looks very, very different. So somewhat with a pragmatic view, you could argue that the spinning jenny, when in Britain during 1850 something, that changed all industries, the way we worked. Then the car industry and the T-Ford with the conveyor belt, this automated production and changed all businesses. In the 60s, Toyota introduced lean manufacturing, which I think has had an impact all over the globe. And today, we talk about agile organization and agile strategies. But if you look upon management and you look into any large organizations, the type of people that are engaged in management, they have often arrived there because they have been good at optimizing processes and system and productivity. And if we now talk about innovation, you could argue that if we believe that AI and machine learning will have the impact we think it will have, I believe that those algorithms will be better in optimizing output from a process than any human being in the very, very near future. So what we need to do is to move to a very different type of management, which is about orchestrating people, creativity, and innovation. And this is fundamentally different from optimizing output from processes. And we need to create the corporate culture that allows those two systems to cooperate in the same organization. And this is not easy because it's a big culture difference between these two types of managing people and processes and innovation. And look on this slide. If I would present this to you 15 years ago, you would probably thought I was an idiot. But look on the biggest taxi company today in the world, it's Uber. They don't own one single car. Spotify is the biggest deliverer of music. They don't have any stores, they don't have any artists, they don't produce any records. What all these companies have in common is that it is about disruptive business transformation. And we in pharma, we need to ask ourselves, what would the equivalent look like in our business? Nobody knows the answer, but something will happen. And how should we prepare ourselves for this uncertainty and these huge changes that we see represented by these companies? And that moves us to what we call the BioVenture Hub. This is an initiative it was launched in 2015. It's a private-public partnership with the Swedish government, so it's supported by the government. And the reason is that when we set this up, we didn't want to use it as a means to drive monetary value for AstraZeneca. It is all about catalyzing the creation of new innovation. And it has actually been awarded and being called one of the most novel incubators in the world. And I will now try to explain what it is we have done and why we have done it. And the background before going into describing this is that when I spent a number of years engaged in business development, and the pharma industry, for us, there is nothing like not invented here syndrome. We are used to bring in innovation from the outside. We realize that we don't have monopoly on cleverness. We are dependent on others. But the way we do it is like in any other business. We build business cases to motivate our investments. At some point in a business case, you come to a prediction on return on investment. And that means that you have actually predicted the outcome of the endeavor even before it starts. By definition, we exclude everything we don't understand and are not able to predict. And you could argue that we, by default, exclude disruptive innovation by thinking in this way. So how can we allow ourselves to expose ourselves to novel type of ideas, a novel type of technology that normally would fall outside the framework of our interest because it's basically too novel? And what we wanted to do was to basically introduce the sharing economy into an industry perspective. We wanted to blend 4 different industry sectors into the same physical environment. And we wanted to do it in a way that is non-competitive. So by merging companies that don't face a commercial threat, we have been able to introduce an unseen openness when it comes to sharing knowledge, data, and information. The 4 sectors we have blended, it's traditional biotechs, it's medtech, it's diagnostics, and it is digital. This is, to a big extent, the culture project. It's not a business project, it's not a science project, it's all about culture. And by blending these 4 different industry verticals into the same environment and creating a culture which really is all about openness, we have a saying which is dare to share. And I think the company that dares to ask for help will win, if provided somebody is willing to help. So what this culture is, it's all about informal networks, it's about transparency, and it is to allow ourselves to experiment. If you look into AstraZeneca, I would say that the majority of our staff, they are trained experimentalists, but we very seldom experiment with culture or how we do business. And that's what all this is about. So AstraZeneca has 3 global R&D sites. One is outside Washington in the US. We are located in Cambridge in the UK. And this is the site in Gothenburg on the west coast of Sweden. It's a site of roughly 3,000 scientists, all devoted to R&D. So it's no production. It's basically going from idea all the way up to start of commercial production. So the whole value chain is represented in this unit. What you see in purple here is the location of the BioVenture Hub. So we have, since we started this, had more than 40 external companies that physically moved into AstraZeneca. They are located at the heart of this R&D infrastructure. They have the same access to the whole site as I have as an employee of AstraZeneca. This is quite unique in a business that is so driven by intellectual property and security. But by open up in the way we have done it, it has created a lot of value to both AstraZeneca, to these companies, and to society as a whole. The BioVenture Hub is set up as a subsidiary of AstraZeneca, which is non-for-profit. This allowed us to work in collaboration with the government to get this funded. So the whole model is cost neutral to AstraZeneca. We provide in-kind support, of course, and there is an opportunity cost, but from a budget perspective, it's cost neutral. There are 4 things that makes this quite unique on a global scale. The first is the way it is integrated. It's not put in an adjacent building across the street. It's really embedded. The second thing is that AstraZeneca holds no rights to anything that goes on in this environment. We don't even have a first right to negotiate or a first right to refusal, nothing. No legal ties besides the rental contract between AstraZeneca and the small company. The third thing that makes this different is the fact that this is not an environment for startup companies. In order for this to work, it is really important that these companies have their intellectual property in place when they arrive. So we focus on scale-up companies. And I think Europe in general are very good in generating startups, but we are not as good in generating growth companies. And what we have, I think everybody realizes that the skills you need when you are engaged in research is not the same type of skills you need when you move into development. And industry sits on a lot of competence when it comes to development. And what this is all about is to releasing that competence to support these companies to grow. The fourth thing here, which is different, is the fact that it is not only biotechs. As I said, it's tech companies, it's digital companies, and it's diagnostic companies. And the reason is that the future innovation in our business will be about combining these different type of technologies. Today, we have companies that have moved to Gothenburg from the US, from UK, from Switzerland, and from Holland. So this is not only open to Swedish companies. It's a very good platform for companies who want to access the European market and get support from big pharma. What we provide to these companies, it is not about doing commodity work. If they can buy something, we tell them to buy it, but we help them how to buy it. For example, one problem in this business is the use of consultancies and CROs and CMOs. So these are the providers of different type of research. And to make this very simple, if you go to Volvo and ask to buy a transport solution, they will not sell you a train ticket, they will sell you a car. The same goes with these CROs. They will sell what they can deliver, not necessarily what is best for the company. So we can provide a lot of guidance when it comes to what partners they should choose. But if they ask for really difficult type of help, that's where we try to step in. So these companies can access our advisory boards, they can use the expertise inside the whole of AstraZeneca. And this is invaluable to them. And it is free of charge for them, because this is how we use the governmental funding to reimburse AstraZeneca for the cost. So you could argue that the model is built upon economy of scale in a large organization like AstraZeneca, combined with flexibility of our own resource utilization. And it actually works. I don't expect you know these companies, but some of them are quite big organizations. So Mölnlycke Healthcare is a global company of 10,000 employees. They are in the medtech field, and they have placed an R&D unit inside the BioVenture Hub. Waters is also a large global company dealing with innovation when it comes to analytical equipment. So we are typically a customer of that company. They now have an R&D unit inside AstraZeneca working side by side with their future customers. So we can now influence their research in order to make it more prone to fit our future needs. So it's all about how we can utilize our differences to be more creative and generate value in new ways. So to illustrate how this works, the clogs on the left is all the different small companies, and they have different needs. They approach our team, and we basically serve as a link to the capacity that sits inside AstraZeneca and link them up with the relevant competencies. Since we are not only supporting biotech companies, we have a lot of companies that work in areas outside our home turf, we have added 2 partners to this ecosystem, and it is IBM and it is the company Mölnlycke Healthcare. By doing this, the small companies can access industry competence from 3 different industry sectors: digital, pharmaceutical, and medtech. As such, they are operating in an environment where they can basically access support from 3 large global companies. And none of them have a business interest in doing this. It's all about catalyzing innovation. The BioVenture Hub is part of a global network inside AstraZeneca of innovation hubs. We are the only hub that are connected to R&D. The other hubs are connected to our commercial organization. But this network really adds yet another dimension to this ecosystem, because we can now support these companies with market access all over the globe, something that is really critical if you are a small company, because our business is global from day one. So this is my last slide, and I think it is the most important slide of all. If we look into the future of innovation in healthcare, it will be about combining different type of skills and different type of disciplines. And this is not easy. And one of the difficulties is that the business logics are very different in, for example, digital and pharma. When we approach an ICT company and ask them to collaborate and tell them it will take 8 years to reach the market, they will leave the room. Their technology will probably be obsolete in 3 years' time. So how should we create an opportunity to truly innovate with these companies without being stuck in basically the tradition of how we collaborate? And the BioVenture Hub is all about breaking those boundaries and allow curiosity to drive research rather than monetary expectations. It is not enough to blend technology. We really need to get the patient engaged in this. And I haven't spoken about that, but we have also created another hub, which is called HealthWorks, which is a patient organization inside AstraZeneca, where we can meet up with healthcare providers and patients and really go through the design process with the patient in the center. We have also invited academia to be inside the BioVenture Hub, and we have done that in a very different way. Normally, when we go to academia, we go there because we have a problem and we want to collaborate with them to solve our problem. What we have done is to go out to academia and tell them we don't have a problem, but we have all this. How could you benefit from our competence, our models, our infrastructure? So it's a very different way to work with academia as well. And then we have the hospitals. They are a key component in making this successful. And we need to jointly with them change. There is, to some extent, a barrier today between healthcare providers and the pharmaceutical industry. If we truly want to put the patient in the center, we need to work and innovate together with the hospitals. Finally, we have governments. These are the people who set the framework and the rules of the game. And the rules of today are not fit for purpose. They are built on how we worked yesterday. So I would say that probably the most important component here is to have an agile government. And that is not the case all over the world. So when it comes to aspects to consider here, I think ask yourself whether your regulatory framework is fit for purpose. Ask yourself how you should deal with business model alignment, because when these different verticals meet, it doesn't always marry. When it comes to implementing innovation in society, ask yourself, is all stakeholders incentivized to really implement innovation? I don't think that is always the case. Then ask yourself about your culture, protectionism. We can't protect data, it won't generate result. We need to find ways to share data. So dare to share is the key message in this presentation. Then we have parochialism, which is, it's a word that doesn't actually exist in Swedish, but it's all about defending your own territory and being most in love with yourself. I don't think that is a good way to change the world. Then we need to secure that we have access to test environments. It could be in hospitals, it could be among ourselves, but we need to have the guts to test at an early stage. And then we have the competence base. How do we influence universities to produce the skills of tomorrow, which will look different, I tell you. And finally, and maybe most important of all, what culture are we wanting to implement in our organizations? And that is all about leadership. And that's where I intend to end, Anne. I hope you found it useful.
Thank you. It's very interesting, and I think this page, probably it could be like a few books from this page.
Academia have, I think, published more than 15 articles on what we have done to try to understand. And we call this, we somewhat sloppy call this an incubator, but it is not an incubator. It's not an accelerator. They haven't been able to put it into any box so far because it's a mix of everything.
Thank you. Yes, and I think it's a session for Q&A. If anyone in the audience would like to have ask any question, please feel free to pause it and the team will send it to us. But meanwhile, in one of your slides, you mentioned that, it's a collaboration, and as is that AstraZeneca holds no right to innovation. How does it work when you have collaboration?
I always get this question, and I'm always equally surprised. I mean, we have, even though none of these companies work with a product that is of interest to us, we have entered 70 collaborations with these companies over the years. And that is because we have had an opportunity to explore in a very different way. And I will give you an example. If a small company knocks on our door and tell us that they are working with an odd disease of no interest to AstraZeneca, we will say, sorry guys, we are not interested. Now we have these odd companies inside our own organization, and biology is not framed in the same way as our brains are. So you could see that one mode of action in a certain disease could be very applicable in another disease. And suddenly we expose ourselves to this science, and it creates new ideas, and it creates new projects and new collaborations. And I think this setup creates a lot of information asymmetry. None of our peers knows as much as we do about what these companies are doing. And I will give you another example here. We brought in a company that they are coming from the gaming industry. And you could think about, how can we use gaming technology to train patients to use their medicines? Take the Tamagotchi effect, the result it had on kids. You could ask yourself, could we use a computer game to deal with child obesity instead of something medicines? What can we learn from a company that are experts in using augmented reality? It's obvious that there are gains to be achieved, but it's not easy to ask you to calculate the net present value of that collaboration because we have no idea. But by having these companies inside our own organization, every day our scientist sits down. So we have 250 entrepreneurs inside AstraZeneca. It impacts the way we are thinking about innovation. So I mean, we have more than close to 40 scientific co-publications with these companies. So we really work with them. And innovation is not something you can order. You can't tell anyone to innovate. You can only provide incentives to make it happen. And that's what this is all about.
Thank you. It's very interesting. It seems like, there's a lot, like probably a few thousand of innovation happen, right, under this venture. But how could you pick? Because I asked from a traditional way of people thinking, like NPV. That I think you know what we are from, right? From those people who think of NPV, payback period, what I'm getting, but you can't forecast. You don't know where it is.
But
so
sorry, I will answer your question in a very clear way. Once we know that there is an interest in doing something, we move it into the traditional partnering arrangement. So when they join, there are no ties. But as we develop this together, at some point it becomes a business. And then we are in the normal way of working. So then we have a partnership with the company. It's a traditional, it's a license agreement, it is whatever. So, but the trick is, how do you circumvent the problem of the unknown in the beginning?
Yes.
So even though they are not forced to collaborate with us, I mean, innovation is a contact sport. And we have built an arena for contact. And once you build the relation, so this is all about, we are in the trust business. And that paves the way to getting to the business arrangement. So we don't do this because we are philanthropic. It's a good way for us to access new technology. And at some point we partner with them.
Yes, and it's not easy to balance between creativity and all those, the priority of the fundings and all those stuff, right?
No.
So, yeah, so what I understand is you kind of promote entrepreneurship in kind of innovation, and then which probably you may have some, like, information about what the patient needs, because you did through the patient-centric, right? And then,
yes.
Yeah, and then once you get a patient-centric, you know what they need, and then you develop something through innovation around that, and then you pick one of those ideas to go into the traditional way of looking at investment or project development.
Yeah, I mean, you are describing the ideal world, I think. But I mean, when these companies come to us, they normally have they have made their innovation. They are about to grow it. So
I see.
So I think for us as a company, patient-centricity is everything. I don't think the small organizations necessarily understand that. So we want to help them in getting into that mindset.
I see. I see. Got it. Okay. There's some question coming. Is there a sandbox concept embedded in the hub? And how do you circumvent regulatory barrier?
Sorry, the first sentence, what did you ask? I didn't hear.
Is there a sandbox concept embedded in the hub?
I don't know what the sandbox concept is.
A sandbox concept is you allow them to do experiment. It's like the kids playing in a sandbox. Okay.
I think the whole environment is a huge sandbox. That's all what it is about. But the rules of the game is, so the way this is set up is that these companies have a contract about renting labs and offices. Besides what is in a normal rental contract, there are 3 additional clauses to this contract. One is about ethics. So we have negotiated with the government, so these companies can use our permits for chemicals, for animal experiments, etc., which means that we require that they follow the ethics of AstraZeneca. And this is actually raising the standards in our industry by doing this.
I see.
The second change is, in Sweden, we have something, the right of the tenant to remain in the facility. We have negotiated that away, so we can ask a company to leave if they change their business and it doesn't fit the purpose. The third, which is the most important one, is about confidentiality. So what that says is that all our information is to be regarded as being confidential. all their information is confidential. But when we deliberately exchange knowledge and information with each other, it is to be regarded as being non-confidential.
I see.
So the whole purpose is to share knowledge.
Yeah, to share data and share knowledge.
Yeah.
Because okay, and once they get an idea, they came to you, and you said, AstraZeneca doesn't own anything. You provide facilities, for them to access and use. Can they bring this concept to go where else?
Yeah, I mean, we have no patent on this, so of course they can, but it's really, we have tried to implement this at our site in China. It was not possible to do it in the same way, and for a lot of reasons. We tried to do it in the USA. We couldn't do it there either. And there the reason was that there is a different culture when it comes to legal aspects. So we give a lot of advice to these companies, and you could argue that there is a different tradition in the US with liabilities, and I mean, we could give advice and basically end up in a lawsuit if we are not protecting ourselves. But in Sweden is a very small country. I mean, we are 10 million people. And if you look on the companies that come out of Sweden, I mean, Volvo, ABB, Ericsson, Spotify, Skype, you can make this IKEA, Hennes and Mauritz. It's a culture where, given that we have so few resources, we are so used to collaborate. So it is a collaboration culture that is unique in the Nordics, which we are trying to use as a competitive advantage in this environment. And culture is not easy to replicate.
And creating culture is very difficult too.
It takes a long time. But I think it's important to say that, I mean, we have discussed this with a lot of, I mean, there is a lot of interest in what we have done. And I think the key message is maybe that ask yourselves, in your industry and your culture, what are your unique features? And how can you use your uniqueness to become even more unique? So don't try to copy, try to ask yourself, be inspired and ask yourself, how do we, based on our environment and our people, create something that is unique? I think sometimes we are trying to, we look on others and think we can do the same. And we are all unique individuals, and we are all unique cultures, and we are unique organizations. Build according to your own culture and use that as a strength. And I'm sure you can use your differences in the same way that we have used ours.
Thank you. And one more question is, what are incentives to get innovation culture?
Oh, I think, it's a very good question. I mean, one is on a strategy perspective and organizational perspective. The other one is the people. I think people who choose to work in our industry, they are by definition interested in innovation. Otherwise, you would work in a bank or wherever. They are also innovative, so don't misunderstand me. But I think people is the key component here. And then you need to have a management that realizes the importance of innovation. And I mean, in the pharma business, that's a no-brainer. We all realize it. The difference is what I talked about, the different horizons. To allow yourself to work in areas of high risk. But that's what we need to do in parallel to doing all the other things we do.
I see. Thank you. And another question is, what are the top 5 challenges that you are facing right now? And how do you overcome it?
Top 5. One is, I mean, the value we have generated for these small companies is fantastic. They have grown in a way that we haven't seen anywhere else. So we have been very good, and we created a lot of job opportunities. So the government is super happy with this initiative. So you could look on this into 2 different dimensions. One is value creation for everyone but ourselves. There we have really done well. When it comes to value capture, what we get out of it, yes, we have had a lot of soft values generated. We have had, as I said, a lot of publications and joint collaborations. But if you look into the impact the BioVenture Hub has had on our own balance sheet and P&L, it is yet not realized. So one challenge is to demonstrate that this initiative delivers tangible values to AstraZeneca. And we are now been doing this for 5 years. So now we see that it happens. But if you have that anticipation year one, you will likely fail, because we have spent 5 years building trust. And now we can build on that trust to generate the value. So you need to balance value creation with value capture. That's one challenge. Another challenge has been the model requires that middle management inside AstraZeneca give up resources to support this initiative. And with that we thought should be problematic, but it has turned out that, I mean, this is a superb way to develop our own people. So we see it as a human resource strategy to develop our own staff, because they get exposed to new ways of working, new cultures, and new science. So I wouldn't say it has been a challenge, but it's something you need to be aware of, how you create enthusiasm inside an organization to support an initiative like this. The other challenge is that Sweden is too small. We need to attract companies outside Sweden in order to really build an excellent ecosystem. And I mean, I have 2 minus degrees outside my window today. It's not easy to get somebody to live here. So that's another challenge. And then I think the fourth challenge is what I talked about, the disalignment between the different business logics. How you make that work when it takes 2 years to develop a product in IT and 15 in pharma, and we want to combine that. It's a huge challenge. But I sometimes get the question, what would you have done differently if you were to redo this? And I normally say nothing, because we have changed this 300 times already. So this is like a huge experiment, and we change it all the time to adopt it. So it's not we didn't have a roadmap for what this should become. We only had a vision about what it should deliver and what it should look like. And we have been really treating it as an experiment for 6 years now, and it's still not finished.
I see. Interesting. But it's interesting that you get a very good collaboration from middle management in AstraZeneca, which they definitely will reflect in terms of what the patient needs as a beginning task for those venture, right?
I think a good analogy here. I think Bernard Shaw, he was a great philosopher. He once said that if you have a fruit, if you have an apple and I have a pear, and we exchange fruits, we will both leave the room with 1 fruit each. But if we exchange ideas, we will both leave the room with 2 ideas each.
I see.
And I think that is what people have realized, that if you can share knowledge, the challenge is that we have the sharing economy, or the circular economy, or whatever you choose to call it. It is about avoiding cost. So we collaborate and exchange knowledge for free, but we don't have systems that measure absence of cost. So you can't track transactions, the value, because you don't monitor the cost. So one challenge is, how do you articulate the value that is created out of an ecosystem like this when there are no transactions being made initially?
Very interesting. And sometimes, some people may think that, if you share information and who are the first who enter into the market, make it more benefit.
Yes,
right?
That's always the case. But remember here that the companies in the hub are not competitors to AstraZeneca. If they succeed, it doesn't impact our sales because their products are not the same as our products. They are not
Right.
targeting the same customer. And that is the key to why this works. It's
I see.
non-competitive.
I see. Very interesting. Yeah. Okay. I think that's pretty much the question I got from the floor. And I think, this is a fantastic opportunity to learn from your interesting experience that, even it's technology, but it's going around in terms of soft side that, collaboration, culture, sharing, and,
Yes.
and room for experimenting. It becomes something that, can be applicable to many industry. And, thank you so much for sharing this, great experience with us. And I think, this is, and this is a great opportunity for us to put it into, think about it and also take an action, make it happen in our industry.
Oh, and maybe one last word to say is that we spend a lot of time thinking about what to do. I think we should spend a little more time thinking about how we do things.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you very much, and appreciate. May I convey a lot of appreciation to Dr. Magnus Björsne for this is very insight experience, which is very valuable, and we have to try to make it happen.
And if you have any questions post this, don't hesitate to get back to me. I'm happy to be of assistance.
Thank you very much. And for all the audience, in the next Top Talk to be held on 21st of December, will be about the green innovation for smart city by the head of technology and innovation of Siemens in Germany. So mark your calendar on 21st of December if you'd like to join the next event. And today, I think I need to close this session and convey our appreciation to Dr. Magnus. Thank you very much, Dr. Magnus.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, once again, on behalf of TMA and our distinguished guests, I wish to express my sincere and appreciation and thankfulness for Mr. Magnus Björsne and Ms. Piapon Panachet for an insightful talk, which I truly believe is very beneficial to all of us. Well, and before we go, I would like to seek your cooperation in completing the evaluation form by scanning the QR code on the screen or clicking at questionnaire button below on your screen. Your feedback is essential to us as we can continue to improve our programs and services to you. Well, we have now come to the end of TMA Top Talk, pushing the boundary, creating a novel innovation ecosystem at AstraZeneca. I would like to express our appreciation to generous sponsors, Bangkok Bank Public Company Limited and Siam Commercial Bank Public Company Limited that have been such a great support. Finally, TMA would like to thank all of you for joining us today. We also look forward to seeing you again at, once again, our upcoming TMA Top Talk on December 21st under the topic Green Innovation for Smart City by Dr. Michael Weinhold, Head of Technology and Innovation Smart Infrastructure at Siemens. Once again, thank you very much and have a good evening. สวัสดีค่ะ